At the global, all starts with a patient. So what happens when a patient, a liver patient no less, one of the 500 million people living with conditions that often go undiagnosed, untreated, or misdiagnosed, mistreated, and stigmatized, brings the challenges of liver patients front and center? And what happens when a patient then leads a discussion with world experts in policy, research, clinical care, and wellness on ways to overcome these challenges? Let's find out today on GLI Live. Hello and welcome. My name is Donna Cryer. I am the CEO and founder of the Global Liver Institute. For those of you who are continuing on with this special series for Pediatric and Rare Liver Diseases Month, we take the whole month. Even though February has 28 days, you know, rare is still very, very important all year long. For those of you who have been watching the series and are wondering, will she wear stripes? I will find some stripes before this series ends. I know I've done checks, I've done spots, and rare diseases are represented by zebra stripes. I will get it together. I will, like, promise. If you keep watching, I will find some stripes. But what I have found are some fantastic guests to talk to us about parenthood in rare liver disease. I'm so excited that we're able to use this time, the spotlight, and highlight to talk about issues of parenthood and pregnancy in rare liver diseases. And so I have with me Brittany Elliser and Ashley and Taylor Rhoades. Dr. Rhoades, I know we have to share you with cardiology, but for today, you are a member of the liver community. So, Brittany, why don't you start and share with us how you got involved with these issues?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I am excited to be here. My second son, Briggs, was born with biliary atresia, which is, a rare liver disease in the pediatric community. He had 3 transplants by the time he was 6 months old. So we went through a bit of a roller coaster there for a little bit, but the outcome was good. And we've just sort of made it a mission in our family to spread awareness and spread the good things that come from, having this awful disease. There is good in the darkness. So that's why I'm here.
That is a wonderful, you are a light. And that is, I having had 1 transplant, I with hopefully a few more, emotional tools and skills than a 6-month. I think that's just amazing. But it does highlight the issue that few people know that children even get liver disease.
Yeah.
So that's really important for people to know. Ashley, why don't we start with you, and then we'll get to Taylor and tell us your story.
Yeah, so I guess we were introduced to biliary atresia through our son John. He is our 3rd one, and he was diagnosed at a month and 8 days, I believe. It seems like all a blur right now, but it's, I guess, Brittany, it's a tough journey, and John's only had 1 transplant, but I don't have the words. I think right now this is the first time really talking about it with other people, and there's a lot of emotion behind it, but
Absolutely.
It's a tough journey.
It is. Taylor, why don't you jump in and feel free, as we say, if somebody wants to make their LinkedIn Live debut today, that's fine. You're welcome.
He sees Dad on the screen, so.
Yeah, I think, as Ashley, stated, she definitely has been the caregiver throughout this journey, just working full time and definitely being a caregiver, for the patients that I come across. It was definitely, I would say my world was turned upside down being on the other side of the fence. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the things that it's affected us is that I think it has brought us a lot closer as a family, and then also has given us a new family that we are now a part of when it comes to liver awareness, liver disease. And so to know that we are now part of this family, I think, and we're not alone in this journey, I think has been also just really comforting when it comes to John's diagnosis and what he will live with for the rest of his life.
I wanted to ask, that's so powerful. I wanted to ask you about that point of diagnosis. You know, do you have medical training? You've made diagnoses. How did that diagnosis come to you and your family? And looking back at it, are there ways that could have been better, differently? I mean, catching it at 1 month is really good. So so lots of things went right. But tell us about that moment of diagnosis.
Yeah, for us, you know, my wife, she breastfed all of our children, and so jaundice was, you know, kind of, I guess you can say, something of maybe normalcy with baby breastfed and jaundice, and so nothing really hit us hard. And I think as a parent, we try not to look for the faults or the and try to diagnose our children to an extent because we see them as perfect children, and so when they present to us, and so seeing faults, seeing things that we don't want to see or we don't want to have our eyes open to, I think is sometimes the struggle. And so the diagnosis, you know, was mainly definitely done by our pediatrician, you know, early on, and we give actually the start of our journey to her, because it was her who was saying, you know what, let's just run a more direct bilirubin, you know, for him, and to see what's just in case. And it was that initial diagnosis that really caught that. But I think, like I said, as a caregiver with our own patients, or, you know, we try not to see those diagnoses in our children because we don't want to see the imperfections. We want to see them as the perfect children they are, you know. And so, but we don't have any regret, I would say, or in my sense, I don't.
Brittany, in your situation, clearly to be able to get through the transplant system multiple times, you had to have created strong connections with your medical team. You know, what are the things that you, I'll just say, learned along the way and are still learning probably?
I would say, so today, weirdly enough, is actually the day he got diagnosed back in 2015. So I just looked at the date and I was like, oh gosh, that was today. So we started, his birthday is December 29th. So we got diagnosed pretty early on too. We had the Kasai. We had transferred down to New Orleans to do a possible Kasai revision. And that was the point where we kind of established care at the Transplant Institute. And so we knew eventually at one point that's where we were going to be. I went in just being open and honest and saying, I want to learn. I want to know. I want to understand. I don't just want to have the talks given to me and not really understand what this means. I'm a CPA, so I'm a numbers person. I was charting labs before there was my chart available. You know, I was doing all the things. So for me, I was very focused on the numbers. And I think, you know, just having those open and honest conversations with our medical team allowed us to form a connection early on. And then ultimately, you know, when it did come time for transplant, we were pretty familiar with the hospital. We had already stayed there for other reasons, cholangitis and things like that. So we kind of just formed connections that way. I would just say, you know, telling them when you don't understand what a number means or what a word means. I couldn't even pronounce biliary atresia for the first 2 weeks, I feel like. So, you know, just kind of laying that groundwork, I think, helped us eventually, you know, just be ready, even though things can still go wrong.
I think that's a steep learning curve from you know, CPA to transplant hepatology.
Yeah. My husband calls me Dr. Brittany, but you know.
my husband is a physician, and so from time to time he looks at me, he's like, you're a really good fellow at this, at this point. Particularly when I start charting out my lab results and things like that. So one of the things that we try at GLI, at our Advanced Advocacy Academy, we always have sort of one of our friends at NIH from the liver branch come and do just a section on, you know, liver language and terminology, so that no matter sort of what, you know, part of the spectrum or type of liver disease you come from, you can have a sort of a grounding in these, lab values and terms and things like MELD scores.
Yeah.
Maybe Taylor, if you would take a try at just telling our audience a little bit about, MELD scores and the types of things that you need to know as you prepare for transplant.
Yeah. And, please actually definitely jump in because, like I said, even her, she's an expert when it came very similar to Brittany. So, my wife has definitely had to learn a lot when it comes to MELD scores and such.
We're trying to make you feel useful because we could really just do it with the two.
I'm glad. And so, I just want to, I going home tonight, I want to make sure that I don't sleep on the couch. No, definitely. When it came to the MELD scores, the model for the end stage liver disease, in terms of quantifying it, I think we've definitely learned, and especially even myself, not very familiar with the pitfalls and some of the intricacies involved in the transplant world, is that it's definitely looking at creatinine, bilirubin, INR, sodiums. However, what's very, I think, interesting when it comes to these numbers is that as a patient, we're giving medications to help regulate these numbers. And so, you're trying to fight for your son to be on a transplant list to get him the liver that he needs, but yet he has to be at this point in his end-stage liver.
You need to be sick enough
to
get a transplant, but not so sick that you wouldn't survive it.
Exactly. And so, and that to me was really just tore at my heart. And I think Ashley definitely, I think that was even hard for her because we didn't want to see him get there. And, we want those numbers high in terms of the MELD score, but we don't want to see him suffer. And so, Ashley, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Just speaking about numbers, I remember the last couple of weeks up until he was transplanted, he was in and out of the hospital with cholangitis and, a lot of fluid in the belly. And they would give him medication, diuretics, to help with the fluid in the belly. And for a little part of me was just like, just leave it, because that would put him higher on the score for transplant. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want to spend what we have in the hospital knowing we could be called for transplant and we have older kids. So those numbers were scary though. I mean, not only did we look at like bilirubin, John is a very special kid. So he also has like MCAD, which is another rare, disorder. But we were looking at his AFP levels, and those were just so high at times. And so they were like, okay, does John have tumors? And before we could even get on the transplant list, we had to go through so many other doctors, like oncology, just to see what else was going on with John. But those numbers went down and we were able to get on that list once we did all that.
So AFP is alpha fetoprotein, and yes, it usually is a marker of liver cancer. It's what we typically use with imaging to diagnose liver cancer. So that's even scarier to think of when you are dealing with your child. It's one thing to need a procedure like a Kasai procedure. It's a whole other thing to be talking about transplant and availability of organs for children, and then to have to think about cancer is even harder. And so I think that's why we're having the conversation today, to let people know that there are families like this that do need care and attention and services from their hospital and health systems as well. There aren't enough liver nurse navigators and social workers who understand these issues, and we'd certainly like more.
Could I add on to that, if you don't mind?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and I thought that's something that I told my wife. Definitely working in healthcare, definitely I've had the experience to know how to navigate the health system and get the immediate appointment that we need, and get the immediate, know who to contact regarding X, Y, and Z, know paperwork to fill out, know what documentation is needed,
Mhm.
etc. And so, one of the things I think for me is that really came out of this is that people who are less educated, people who don't
Right.
have the resources, people who live in rural societies like that in
Mhm.
Oklahoma, for example, where we
Mhm.
live, what is offered to them. And so I think for sure there is a lack of resources for a subgroup of people, but then
Mhm.
when we talk about rare diseases, even for a smaller group of people, there's lacks resources for that type of people within this subsection as well.
I agree
Absolutely.
100%. There's in Louisiana, I mean, we're a poor state. We're uneducated. We're last in everything. And our doctors use older patients and moms and caregivers to kind of
Mhm.
be that advocate or that person that
Mhm.
goes in and talks to the new moms just to say,
Mhm.
hey, this formula, you need this formula and it's given to
Mhm.
you and you have to use it. You can't use anything else. And these are the reasons why, just as a mom to mom, instead
Mhm.
of saying, here's the protein and they're not absorbing it and they're not absorbing fat. So this is why,
Mhm.
they don't have the education to understand it. And it's a really sad place to be in a lot of times because you just know that they're young moms and they don't
Mhm.
have the support that I had or that some other people
Mhm.
had. So it's crazy.
Mhm. So you another area where you make it a little less crazy for people is on the organ procurement side.
Yes.
And so for people who aren't familiar with organ procurement organizations and the role that they play in this whole sort of miraculous process, why don't you educate our audience?
Yeah, so I actually serve on the board of our organ procurement agency in Louisiana. I got involved through them through a volunteer sort of advocate line of way. They do a lot of education in our community of why transplant is there and how to sign up to
Mhm.
be an organ donor. For me though, I got on just educating about transplant and Briggs's story too. But they ultimately are the ones that go out and kind of make the calls to line up to see if it's the
Mhm.
perfect match, and they're the ones that are kind of supplying the nurses that do that. We actually have a center in Louisiana where it's called the Donor Center, and they bring a patient from area hospitals and they actually perform the transplant there. And so it's sort of a state of the art, newly concept that they're
Mhm.
trying out and seeing if that
Mhm.
can help, you know, lessen wait times and do different things,
Right.
just trying everything that we can to reduce that wait time and get people, things that they need, so and the care that they need. It's a really special place to visit if you're ever in Louisiana.
I am in Louisiana often, and I will definitely take you up on that. Tours
Yeah.
of donor centers is something that ends up on my list. I remember visiting Howard Nathan's center in Philadelphia years ago when I was on staff at UNOS.
Yeah.
Uh, a couple of things that you said that are really important. I want to underscore. One, the opportunity for folks like you to tell their story in the communities, well before someone needs a transplant or a family is in a position to make that decision to donate, to give, is so important, so that transplantation is not some sort of new thing or a foreign thing or a scary thing, but they're like, oh yeah, I remember that mom, I remember that child that was alive and vibrant because someone donated. And I think having that dedication and commitment to ongoing community outreach to all communities is so important, so that that conversation at that later crucial moment has some fertile soil in which to in which to grow, and then the innovative technologies and things to shorten the waiting times and improve the health of the organ, so it doesn't, for most people, um, kidneys can last outside of the body for about
Mhm.
48 hours. That's why you hear more stories about them traveling along. Livers, less so. And then hearts and lungs are really fragile, only about 4 hours. And so, being able to, you know, just really optimize the health of that donated organ, that precious gift, is
Yeah.
really important. It's really
Yep.
important.
I will say, out
particularly
of
for the
all the
little ones.
talks that I've given, there's always been someone in the crowd that has a connection to transplant. It never fails. And we've talked
Yeah.
to high school students, nurses,
Mhm.
older college communities, every possible place that you could think of. There's someone
Mhm.
who has an aunt, uncle somewhere that they find that connection. And I think that's the cool part.
It is. Transplantation is it's a miracle. It's something, but I feel like I've lived my whole career since my transplant trying to walk people back to like not need it.
Yeah.
Can we not need it? Because there aren't, until we start 3D printing of organs and doing all those things, there aren't enough for everyone. And I can't imagine. I mean, I know how hard it was for my parents, even while waiting, when I was in the ICU, and and I was already an adult. I'll use air quotes because I think of me in my 20s, I was like an adult. Never to them still. And so for a child, to be parents of small children, waiting for that transplant, waiting for that donated organ is even harder. And so if there are things that we can do to help doctors, to prevent the diseases, to understand the genetic causes of things like biliary atresia, to help them identify it earlier, so Kasai procedures are still options. We want to be able to sort of nudge it forward. So are you seeing things on that end in terms of research in biliary atresia, research in pediatric liver diseases, or something that you'd really like to see or help catalyze, so that fewer families are in the position that you are?
You want to go, Taylor?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think, again, with John, in terms of research, one of the things that I don't know if it's a benefit or even, just the crux, but John, like Ashley stated, he was also born with a rare genetic disorder that we actually got as a first primary diagnosis for him. And that's called MCAD. And so with that diagnosis, as well as his biliary atresia, is pretty much, what is it, Ashley? 1 in 200 million or
350.
300, yeah, 350 million. So our odds of playing the lotto are probably much better. But
Should play.
Win those millions.
Working with our geneticists already, definitely having the conversations as to what has led to biliary atresia, is where the research that I think I find more interesting and wanting in terms of that. I think also, what are we doing in our daily lives that could probably prevent this as well? And to your point, Donna, is that, I think about, again, social determinants of health that do affect genetic in our generations to come, correct? And so is there a subset of population within our communities that this does just affect entirely, and what's the research behind that? And so what type of changes do we need to make in our community or within our eating habits and providing better foods, et cetera, for our future generations in terms of genetics, and what is the work that's being done that to improve that for our communities, I think is huge as well.
I think that is a great issue to raise as, we hopefully get beyond a little bit as an organization, beyond the basic sort of blocking and tackling of, writing brochures and doing things, and really thinking about, epigenetics and environmental justice. And are we triggering autoimmune diseases and more rare liver diseases by where we do pollution and where communities live? And so I think that those are those issues deserve a spot on our agenda, as well as others, as we think about this next generation of hopefully non-patients, because everybody has a liver, so everyone has a risk of a liver disease, whether they know it or not. Hopefully, if we have our druthers, they will know it. And so it really does become a conversation about liver health, about public health, about our food and nutrition policy, about our climate and environmental policy, since the liver filters so many things, and our epigenetics are changing, as we see, rates of different diseases increase. And so I think that that's an important part of this conversation. Another area, perhaps maybe just of sort of patient-centered research, or parent-centered research here, again, given this crew, are there things that you want to have more information on as your children grow up? Like, I was really amazed that there was, I needed knee replacements at a young age because I'd been on so much prednisone back in the old days of transplantation. We got rid of that, you guys. So I was on it for ridiculous periods of time, as we now understand it. And so I asked, how do patients with liver transplants, do with knee replacements? And they're like, oh, and there wasn't really data to pull. And so, are there the types of, sometimes increasingly we're doing research on, using electronic health records and using registries, using, claims data, and being able to answer some more of the day-to-day questions that patients and families sort of think about. So are there questions that you'd love to have more information on to inform things as your children grow? Brittany, and then Ashley, and then Taylor.
I think for us, and Ashley, you may feel this way too, but it was, as a mom, hearing that they don't know why it was caused was really hard for me, because I felt like I did something wrong in my pregnancy. And then I feel like we're still learning every day. We didn't think about at the time, because his bilirubin was so high, that it would affect his teeth, or his dental health, and we do know that now, and we can see it now, but how to prepare for that? I mean, what can you do? Is there anything to do? Is it just a lost cause at that point? I think just, there's all these articles about, red dye and what to eat and things like that for these kids, and how it affects their growth and their development and what's good for them. They're already at a disadvantage, and they're already delayed in some senses because they've been through so much. So I think it's just, knowing that up front is always better for me. But then when you piggyback it on with, you don't know what caused it, I just feel like I'm always in a constant state of wanting to know more. So
no, I agree 100% with everything that you said. That was one of my main questions with the doctors, and just to myself, even to this day, it's like, okay, what did I eat? What did I do? Where did I go? But again, there's like, you did nothing. You can't beat yourself up about it. And you're like, that doesn't help me as a mom.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, if I could ever, my mother still, looks longingly into my no longer jaundiced eyes, and still asks herself, these questions. And if I could give any gift, it's just the, release of guilt. There are, if nothing else, I'll just say this. I'm over 50. I went to Harvard. Like, they'll be okay. I lift weights, like the likelihood is they'll be okay.
So you're saying he can play football?
You're okay. You'll be okay. We've got them.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Donna, is that you can now tell my wife he can play football and he'll be
That's a big no. Every transplant surgeon says no.
I recommend soccer.
But hey, I am sorry. I have to go. I have to get back at my role, and my wife will definitely do us justice in terms of just speaking, being the advocate she is for John. And I do greatly appreciate this opportunity to speak with you, Donna, meet you, Brittany, and hopefully we'll get more involved with your organization, and very happy just to hear what you are doing. So thank y'all. It means a lot.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Taylor. Well, we were wrapping up anyway, so this is fine. I'll just give each of you the last word, maybe Ashley and then Brittany. What would you most want people to know about your your children? When they think about your children, what do you want them to know?
Everybody says that John has the joy of the Lord in him because he's just always been such a happy baby. And so I want them to know that. But I think people have like this misconception that just because John had a transplant that he's fine. But they don't know how after transplant we still struggle with how their veins are shot. And
it gets better. It gets better. I promise.
Okay, right now we're struggling still.
Yeah, we struggled for a while.
Don't let them forget about like the vein, like there's some good one like back here.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've done the head too. The head.
Oh God.
The head. Yeah.
And I think just people tend to, I don't know, Brittany, about you, but I know we've had a couple of people, and I spoke with a couple moms who have mentioned before transplant, they had so many people reach out to them. And then after, it kind of just diminished. Right. And it's like, we're still going through things. Just because he's been transplanted means it's good, right? But we still need your support and everything. So I think them knowing that our kids, they're normal kids. We want to treat them like normal kids. Don't treat them any different. Don't treat us any different, but also respect the wishes that we have when it comes to our babies, and that we need support. I saw you. Do you also work with Bear Inc?
Yes.
Okay, so that really helped me at the beginning of our transplant journey, and we continue to follow them. And so the community, the liver community, it's amazing. Yeah, I love the community of biliary atresia moms and what they've done for me and how much they've been helpful.
Yep. Excellent. We'll make sure that the link to that organization as well, and forgive me for not mentioning it up front, is in the show notes, because it is a remarkable resource. So Brittany, what would you love for people to make sure they know about Briggs?
Yeah, I would also echo Ashley's sentiment that he definitely has some kind of joy deep inside of him from above that can only be explained. And he is a true walking miracle. I think that, in addition to Briggs, he has an older brother. So I would want to say that it's a family affair. This disease, this transplant, everything about Briggs's story has affected him and his brother, in addition to, grandparents, aunts and uncles too. And it takes a village, and that, none of us are alone. There might be times where we do feel more alone than others, but, take that plunge and reach out. And I guarantee you there'll be someone there that can lift you up and walk with you when you need it.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I wish you and everyone listening the joy of the Lord. Thank you.
Yes.
Please be sure to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Join us weekly on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time for more episodes of GLI Live. Check out our website, globalliver.org, and follow us on social media to learn more about the Global Liver Institute and stay up to date with the latest in liver health. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay connected.